अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of News Laundry Hafta. We're recording this on Friday the 11th of April at 10 in the morning. Before we start, I'd like to plug our series for which we still haven't reached the full top-up of funds, which is the impunity of India's police, a series of investigations we'll be doing across at least 5 states, if not more, with 5 journalists between News Minute and News Laundry. It's going to be a joint investigation. The pre-production has started, the research has already started, and we have actually collected more than half, but half is still to go. And as you know, we don't rely on sarkari ads or the ads of large corporations. We rely on you. We hope you can top it up. The budget for this investigation is 13,40,000. We have collected 9,31,000, which means we are about 4 lakh short. I hope you top that up. There's a QR code flashing on your screens right now, and there's also a link in the show notes, whether you're on a podcast platform or on YouTube or on the News Laundry website. Do click pay to keep news free, because like we say, when the public pays, the public is served. Let me introduce the panel. In the studio today, Shardool Katyayan. Thank you, Shardool.
Hello.
Long time. How have you
Yes,
been?
I'm fine. Just a couple of weeks, not long.
Okay. Manisha Pande.
Hello.
Welcome, Manisha. Raman Kirpal.
Hello.
And joining us at a rather unearthly hour at his end, and we are grateful he has made the time, is Rohan Goswami, a business reporter from Semafor. Thank you, Rohan.
Happy to be here.
You're joining us from Washington.
Joining you from New York right now,
Oh,
actually.
you're in New York, but you're
But
based
same
in
time zone, same thing.
same time zone. But you're based in Washington, is that right?
Well, I'm actually out of our New York office. Our biggest office, one of our biggest offices is in Washington. So we've got a presence in New York, we have a presence in DC, and that
Okay.
we find generally covers us when it comes to covering all the big news out of the US, anyways.
Right. And that platform is Semafor. I'm going to ask you a little bit about that. But before joining Semafor, Rohan was a reporter at CNBC. He covered technology companies, shareholder activism. His reporting has also appeared in outlets like the NBC News and NBC Chicago. And we would just like to tell everybody, and of course we'll remind you before we let him go, that Semafor has a World Economic Summit coming up, and there is a link to that summit in the show notes, so you can click on that, and all our viewers, listeners, and subscribers in the US can consider if they can attend. But I was looking at your website, Rohan, before we get into what's happening in the US. It says that it's different. Semafor as a platform. It's a transparent news kind of organization. Now, because News Laundry is also a new digital native, and we always like to learn from best practices from different organizations around the world, I just like to understand, what is transparent news as defined by Semafor?
Sure, I'll say this, right? I mean, I think the goal of any good reporter is to remove their bias from the reporting, right? To be as objective as possible. But the reality is, as all of you can attest, right? If you know what you're reporting on very well, of course you have an opinion on it.
Right.
And of course, in some way or another, it colors whether that's the experts you choose to talk to, the kinds of questions you ask your sources, or even the stories that you choose to sort of hone in on. And so the idea at Semafor, we have something called the Semaform, because we're all about fun new words, is that you have essentially several different components to any bit of original reporting. So in a given story or scoop, I might have, first of all, right, the hard news, right? What's actually happening? What's going on? If it's a particularly sort of complicated or nuanced situation, we'll have a know more section where we get into a little more detail beyond just the core news. And then we generally have a view from the reporter, right? So that's this reporter's opinion on the news or a trend or an interview or whatever it might be. Not contenting ourselves with just one view, we also like to include what we alternatively call either a room for disagreement, that's a contra to our view, or a view from either another source, another reporter, another outlet, right? The idea being that news consumers are going to find this information anyways. And so if you can present it to them in a way that's concise and ideally makes it clear what's opinion, right, and what isn't opinion, then hopefully they walk away from that feeling a little bit better, a little bit happier about the news that they're consuming.
I see. All right. Interesting. So thank you for that. Before we get into the discussion, let's look at the headlines of the week.
Tahafur Rana, a Pakistan-born Canadian national and a key accused in the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks, was extradited from the US after the Supreme Court there rejected his final plea to block the move. He arrived in India this morning. And there's some photos that have been released of him by the
Yesterday
US
morning, you mean?
yesterday.
Yesterday evening.
Yesterday
evening.
Evening.
US come on.
Ah.
Supreme Court held that Tamil Nadu Governor R.N. Ravi's decision to withhold assent to 10 bills, some of which were pending since January 2020, and refer them to the President after they were reenacted by the Assembly was illegal and erroneous.
We shall be discussing this in some detail. We
Yeah.
have a guest joining us on matters of federalism from Bangalore.
Trump's tariff U-turn, the big story of this week. Hours after Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs took effect, the US President reduced the tariff on imports for most countries to 10% for the next 90 days. Global markets witnessed a severe dip ahead of the April 9 deadline. However, he increased the tariffs on China to 125%, citing lack of respect. And there's been a very strange AI war that China has launched in America where they keep releasing videos with like Americans in sweatshops.
And also that 125%, he then recalculated and said it's actually 145% next month.
JP Morgan has revisited its odds for a global recession by the end of 2025 from 40% to 60%. And meanwhile, the RBI in India cut the repo rate by 25 basis points, lowering it to 6%. Indian stock markets on Monday witnessed one of their worst falls in 10 months as sweeping tariff announcements by Trump triggered a global sell-off. The Bombay Stock Exchange Sensex ended the day at 73,137 points, down. But we still were kind of better than the rest of the stocks across the world. Exchange. The Noida police arrested the owner of a restaurant after a woman claimed that she was delivered non-vegetarian biryani instead of the vegetarian one during Navratri. And it turns out so in this case, it was interesting. I saw a lot of right-wingers go at the woman because I think there's a little anger that everyone now can just become someone by doing all this on social media. And so some right-wing accounts only tweeted the menu out of this Lucknowi kebab restaurant, which doesn't have vegetarian biryani. So I don't know what she ordered. And then they were like, ki Navratri ke time, वैसे भी, why are you going to Lucknow kebab paratha to order something?
No,
Like,
also,
go to Haldiram, no?
and
Like,
how is
if
this
you
an issue that the police will arrest
It is
someone for it?
disgusting that somebody's been arrested for this.
I mean,
Forget the conspiracy angle of it. Even if someone has by mistake sent you non-veg biryani, what does it warrant an arrest?
it's such
ridiculous.
And in Navratri, I mean, I was expecting many things. And one of them I expected, which I thought, Bengalis are going to oppose it like hell, is the fish market in Chitranjan.
And the chomus.
I spoke about it in the meeting.
And next day,
I was telling Manisha, yeah, kahin wahan, kisi ko bheje wahan pe reporter ko. So we were a little uncertain, but I said this will be the, last thing that can happen in Delhi. It happened. Okay, this will, and see, they could not move those. Of course, Bengalis arrested. It didn't happen, but just about, I think, about a kilometer away, there's a place, Gobindpuri, which had a very good fish market. That has been demolished yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was also one of the addas where CR Park guys used to go.
So I think, the ultra Hindus, the two Chomu 1 and Chomu 2 who were telling the Bengalis that Hamare Shastra mein likha and all. So Chomu 1, Chomu 2, very good idea. BJP has, of course, distanced themselves from both the Chomus, saying these Chomus are not our Chomus. The Chomus are acting on their own. Because telling a Bengali not to eat fish. So Chomu 1, Chomu 2 and all the other Hindutva Chomus, I have a great plan for you. Next, go to Rajouri Garden or Punjabi Bagh and tell all the Punjabis and other Sikhs and people from Punjab like me that don't eat tandoori chicken or butter chicken during Navratra. I'm sure you'll be welcomed with Raj. And go to then Punjab after that. Go to Amritsar and say don't eat Amritsari fish during it. I'm sure you will, char chand lag jayenge. I think you should really have the BJP should have one little subgroup of chomus who go around doing these test case scenarios. But yeah, it was disgusting.
Durga Puja pandals are all about fish.
Yeah.
It's such an intrinsic part of their culture.
Yes.
So ridiculous. And this brings us to Piyush Goyal's intervention at the startup Mahakumbh, where he slammed Indian billionaire kids for opening ice cream and cookie businesses, calling them startups instead of focusing on the nation's tech growth. He got a lot of backlash, even from those guys who suck up to the government usually. But I think what is the one thing that businesses do need to flourish? A certain sort of certainty.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of uncertainty you throw any business into. like this Lucknowi kebab paratha guy
Hmm.
who's been arrested, would he have ever thought that something like this could... This is such a disincentivization of...
Absolutely.
Although Piyush Goyal will not call this a startup because it's food. he wants semiconductor chips and
No,
all
but
that.
also it was interesting to know that Ashwini Vaishnav in that whatever, I think it was a money control event, said that actually AI is being developed very well in India. The startup culture is very good, which
Yeah.
was throwing shade at Mr. Piyush Goyal, and then Piyush Goyal then later clarified that he didn't mean to say that. So of
It
course
wasn't
they're
a truth bomb.
falling over each other.
Why is Goyal talking also like some Gen Z? No? Truth bomb nahi hai ye wo.
एक तो पीयूष गोयल should think long term. He's a commerce minister. Like अपना नहीं तो कुर्सी का तो ध्यान रख. You need innovation and research. Government पैसा देती नहीं है. क्या हवा में research करें क्या?
Not just that. Deti, आप जब just see the regulatory framework around FDI. Like Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah do not want to make available, the final beneficiaries of their trust and PM trust. Do you know when we took FDI, they wanted the passport details of the final beneficiary, which means at that time Modi and his wife had to send the paisa. You mad? I'm not going to give my passport details to some bureaucrat sitting somewhere in your country. I mean, the kind of rules that they have, and of course it has no value. It's like, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, like FDI comes later. I'm talking about fundamental encouragement to just research and ask questions. That is not developed. And the second thing is, he's criticizing food things. Your government is most visible opposing food things.
Yeah, exactly.
What the fuck? Like India, everybody is obsessed with food and marriage, and you're saying don't start food and marriage startups.
But I think actually, Mr. Piyush Goyal in his annoyingly grating voice like that is the biggest loudmouth of this government. He payloads the most gyan, appears the most ignorant, and then is backtracking most often.
I know.
I just don't get what his trip in life is.
And just the snobbery of lecturing people when you haven't done your job, boss.
Even,
I mean, for once I agree with all
2% of the budget is
this.
not spent on R&D. I mean, not even 2%. So I mean, forget it.
और कोई अगर इंडिया में बिजनेस कर रहा है तो आई थिंक वो बस अपने भरोसे कर रहा है. I think you just thank that somebody is even doing business in India.
And if they will do any research at all with some private entity just to benefit that private, like for example this COVID thingy.
Waqf Act protests. Several states witnessed protests against the Waqf Act cleared by Parliament last week. In West Bengal's Murshidabad, the protest turned quite violent. Police vehicles were tossed and a group of protesters clashed with the police. Mamata Banerjee said the act will not be implemented in Bengal. Meanwhile, the DMK has filed a petition in Supreme Court challenging the act along with AAP MLA Amanatullah Khan. A Delhi court stayed a magistrate's order to the police to carry out further investigation against BJP leader and State Law Minister Kapil Mishra for his alleged involvement in the 2020 Northeast Delhi violence.
One of my recommendation is, I mean, look, whatever he had said, and this FIR was so essential in his case. And we have done one documentary, of 35 minutes. Story of 4 persons who were arrested in Delhi 2020, and you will see their roles. There's one girl, young girl, very idealist, who used to write poems and all. If 4 or 5 cases were slapped against them, they are already out in 3-4 cases. There one particular case that is of UAPA, where the onus is on you to tell that you are innocent. They are still in the jail, rotting in the jail for the past 4 or 5 years. And this man who ignited the entire thing.
And also,
and he's out.
This is what the Delhi police argued against the additional chief judicial magistrate's order, saying that you have to proceed with investigation against Kapil Mishra. Delhi police argued that the ACJM's order was liable to be set aside, contending that the trial court erred in directing further investigations when the complainant had initially sought the registration of FIR under section whatever. And they basically said, bhai, we do not want to investigate him anymore. There is no need. Matlab, the police is saying, bhai, hame to karna nahi investigate. Otherwise, they are going into everyone's accounts books.
So pathetic.
It was such a categorical statement, along with the DCP of the area who was standing behind him. He had said so categorically, agar tum log nahi hatoge, to fir hum hain, hum aa rahe.
You can see it on camera.
Yeah, it's on camera.
Kunal Kamra on Monday moved the Bombay High Court seeking to quash an FIR registered against him in the Mumbai case for his satirical remarks on Eknath Shinde. In Tamil Nadu, the Madras High Court extended its interim order protecting Kamra from arrest until April 17th. Dera Sacha Sauda chief Gurmeet Ram Rahim was released yet again for 21 days by the Haryana government. He's been out of prison for 142 days in the past year.
Really, what a disgrace.
This is ridiculous, man. Like anybody says, कानून अपना काम करेगा.
वो तो देख रहे हैं कैसा क्या काम कर रहा है कानून. So, right now let's get into the discussion with our business journalist from Washington, who's in New York right now. The US president dominated headlines around the world, not just in the US, where he's been dominating headlines for a while now. So, Rohan, the context being the tariffs, the escalating tariff war between China and US, and now apparently US tariffs on China are 145%, if I'm not wrong.
That's
Earlier
right.
It was 120%. The stock market tanked. The Dow Jones tanked about 8,000 points when the tariffs were announced. Then it's bounced back 3,000 points.
Some people made a lot of money.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know whether she has acknowledged it or not, but there was a reporter in the US who had put out a note of what Marjorie Taylor Greene had bought just before the tariffs were withdrawn.
There is a joke that Warren Buffett is great. All these fantastic investments are great. If you really want to make money, and now there are ETFs and platforms that actually track this. All you have to do is follow the trades that people in Congress are making. They are uncannily good at making money and timing the market in a way that, I mean, geez, I wish I was that lucky.
So you don't have to follow any big bulls tips. You just follow the tips of
Wall
Congress.
Street spends millions of dollars and thousands of hours putting out analyst notes and reports and research, all of which is very helpful for me. But if you're just trading, I mean, it's really hard to beat some of these guys' returns. It's really incredible.
Right. So after the dip of 8,000, up 3,000 again, it's dipped apparently.
It did, yeah.
The Indian markets have opened today pretty happy. I think it's gone up by 2% or so after having initially gone down 4%. But other Asian markets dipped as much as 8%.
Yes.
So we were less, hit by that, although I don't know how insulated we are from the overall outcome. But coming to what impact this is going to have on the US, on the rest of the world, and more specifically, I was watching the news and Fox Business and some other channels are actually spinning this as a masterstroke. This was Trump's plan all along, which I was pretty aghast. Some of the very creative interpretations of his quote-unquote plan. Is the US public buying it? Do you believe there is a plan? And is this that plan? And what will the outcome be? Because to move manufacturing to the US, like many economists have already, not just economists, even people who cover basic business, it takes anything from a decade or more to move entire, plants and supply chains to the US. Where will this lead, in your view?
Right. So I guess the first part of the question, as with so many things with Trump, with politicians everywhere, it's somewhere in the middle, right? Now, I don't, this is my opinion, and my colleagues have done some wonderful reporting on this as well. I do not think that the president nor his top team, right? So that's Treasury Secretary Bessent, that's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and the U.S. Trade Representative, a guy named Jameson Greer. I do not think they went into last week with some sort of overarching master plan about how exactly this was going to unfold. I think the reality is that, and my colleagues in D.C. have reported this out today and yesterday, Trump created a tremendous amount of panic, right? He got exactly what he wanted in an abstract sense, which is world leaders calling him and begging him for his time, which he does enjoy tremendously. And some Republican operatives, a number of senators, right, correctly and very intelligently, I think, pointed out to the president's team, look, you don't need to panic the markets anymore. You don't need to stress out our allies anymore. You've now created for yourself a tremendous amount of leverage. Go out and use it. And Trump, said, oh, wow, great. I'm so smart. I've created this leverage for myself. Let me go and use it. And so that was the genesis, right, of this flip-flop, this 90-day pause. The bigger question to be asking is whether 90 days is actually enough to cut trade deals with 75 odd countries, even as, the president and China show no signs of abating or pulling back from this trade war, right? We went from 84% to 104% to 125%. Then we woke up this morning and suddenly it was 145%, right? So even as he ratchets down the tension with our friends, he's ratcheting it up with China, which remains our largest trading partner, or the U.S.'s largest trading partner, I should say.
Right.
Do the American people believe it?
Yeah.
Again, that depends on whether you voted for Trump or you didn't vote for Trump. Trump voters have shown themselves remarkably immune to negative news about the president. He had the famous line, right, in 2016, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and my people would still vote for me. And frankly, that's turned out to be true, as evidenced by the fact that he was elected again. That being said, there is a level of stress and latent panic in the conversations I've had with the people who represent or are very close to what we might call the archetypal Trump voter, right? A unionized manufacturing, quote unquote, Rust Belt worker, in that they are now starting to feel the impact of his actions negatively. So a major automaker, right, Stellantis, the day that tariffs were announced, laid off 900 workers.
Yeah.
Right. These are unionized workers. The cynic in me, you might argue that they took the tariffs as an opportunity to, execute some layoffs they were going to do anyways. But the reality is, when I talk to CEOs, when I talk to investors, if Trump hadn't pulled back on this even temporarily, the level of job cuts across a variety of sectors would have been intense, would have been so severe.
When it comes to internally whether he's getting the support he wants or not, in Trump land, of course, no one from the party disagrees with him in a rude fashion, but even a mild disagreement with his policy is seen as a big deal. Now, two vocal opponents to this entire trade war were Elon Musk, who in that interview said that there should be a zero trade arrangement between Europe and the US, and Ted Cruz as well, who kind of did not agree with how this was playing out, although they couched it in words which was still very, complimentary to Trump. Did that have anything to do with him ratcheting it back a bit, that he saw that there was dissent within, or he really doesn't give a shit about that? He rides roughshod over anyone there.
My feeling is that the internal dissension, if anything, would have made him double down, right? This is a guy who has learned one very important lesson from his first term. Never give him a scalp, right? You concede an inch, it's seen as weakness. It's seen as, sort of slovenly and not appropriate. That being said, I would actually say that Republicans were very willing to push back on this once they realized that the markets were collapsing. And more importantly, there was someone that wasn't Trump that they could blame for this. So if you take a look at the reporting and the news and the sort of leaks coming out of DC over the last weeks, a lot of it is focused on one person, Howard Lutnick, right? The former CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, who's now the Commerce Secretary, and drove so much of this agenda. And even though Howard Lutnick is executing the president's orders, right? The president wants him to do this. The leaks that have come from supposed Republican allies and lawmakers that are harshly critical of Howard Lutnick, that's simply because, you're right, Republicans don't feel like they can publicly oppose the president. Very few of them do anyways. And so what do they have to do? They have to create some sort of bogeyman, right? Some sort of nexus for them to channel all their discontent about the president's agenda. But at the end of the day, if the president says jump, most of these lawmakers are going to say how high.
Yeah. In fact, I'd just like to play a little clip from his cabinet meeting, which was aired on television. C-SPAN, of course, recorded this. But just here, this is how his cabinet talks to Trump. This is yesterday.
The U.S. Americans want you to be president because of your agenda.
Mr. President, on behalf of America's manufacturers, I want to thank you for standing up to the Chinese Communist Party and fighting for our Main Streets, for our workers. So the American worker is grateful. Main Street is grateful for you.
What you have assembled in your vision is a turning point and an inflection point in American history. And so just being a part of that is the greatest honor. So thank you for that.
That was Brooke Rollins, the Agricultural Secretary, and other cabinet members. So the cabinet meeting of Trump is, you're so great, you're so wonderful. I mean, it's
I would
embarrassing.
love to be admired, to just walk down the street and have people say that to me, that I'm so wonderful and so amazing.
I mean, it's embarrassing to watch. But before we come back to Rohan, because I had a couple of other questions of how this will play out in the US. How many of you bought day before when the market crashed? I bought Nifty 50. I bought Nifty 20.
I bought
I
Nifty Momentum
didn't.
500.
Manisha raised her
I
I'm
bought
hand.
totally confused. So I
large
didn't
cap.
buy it.
Large
Large
cap.
cap. Which large cap?
I thought just go
large
into
cap.
index funds and mutual funds. Yeah, that's the best. But okay, in India, the Ministry of External Affairs, in fact, Suhasini had tweeted out this report that the MEA refused to comment, and they were asked when Trump's statement that, world leaders are calling me up and kissing my ass and all that.
Yes.
They were asked that what is the Ministry of External Affairs take on this? Of course, I think they wanted to ask, are we one of the nations that kissed the ass? Of course.
So the funny thing is, Arnav had been screaming before that on prime time that we are the only country in conversation with the US. Modi is the only guy calling him up and talking and making sure that we're ahead. So I was like, he really gave it away. Because one day later, Trump is like, they're calling me up. They're like, sir, please, sir. They're kissing my ass.
So, of course, Arnav must have gone quiet on that. And, of
Oh.
course, they had other distractions. Of course, with the Havur Rana coming, that was dominating the headlines. But in India, is this an issue at all? Do you think politically the BJP is at all bothered? Does the electorate give a damn? Because we can't help it. Like 2008,
Yeah.
there's nothing we could do. Of course, there were some headlines that were managed at the time. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, that Pranab Mukherjee was given some credit that the Indian economy was decoupled. So the, the Great Recession or the subprime crisis did not impact us to the extent it impacted other Asian economies. I don't see that kind of narrative being pushed in the media. So should we assume that something like this doesn't matter? Also, not that it's such a big deal, but raising the excise on petroleum, even though, crude prices went down, raising LPG prices the day this whole crash happened.
50 rupees.
50 rupees. So, I mean, I guess it's safe to assume it doesn't matter here, or is the BJP overconfident?
No, I think if you see when the war happened with Ukraine, even then the way we paddled our economy and we went ahead, with the friendship with Russia, the way we took, the advantage of the situation when US was banning everybody. I think India, through its diplomacy, acted very wisely, and we have really gained, out of that crisis. So now there is another crisis now. Here also, I think India was pretty confident. If you see all those, the major exporters, whether it is when we talk of electronics imports, exporting. So this is Apple is here. So all of them had approached the government, and the government said, relax. There's something in the pipeline. I mean, something was on, and they were very confident of it that this is going to happen. So the backdoor, talks with the US, I think, are on. Of course, we don't have the, direct evidence from the government. Government hasn't spoken about it. But as of now, whatever has gone so far, I think India is pretty okay.
I mean, yeah, I think one thing that whether Jaishankar is to be given credit or Modi or whoever, that we are the only major economy in the world that have managed not to take sides between the Ukraine, Russia, and still kind of remain in the middle, gain from both sides. Same with US, China, we haven't taken any side, but yet not been in the shit books of either of them. I don't know how much of a masterstroke it is, but at least we are not at daggers drawn with either of those two economies.
But that's always been us. I mean, you should thank Nehru for that, because that was our stated policy, and they're just continuing that tradition. So I don't think.
Good point. Nehru.
Thank
Modi
Nehru.
are
No, that's true, but you're right.
I mean, it's not like they've invented this. We've
No.
really just gone ahead with what we've always done.
Indira, because before the 71 war, Pakistan was an ally. We have never been an ally. But the thing is, our size benefits us. We have significant today market and military power, population power, now intellectual power, whatever the degree of it may be. But we do have it, which means we can, be sovereign. And that's the meaning of being sovereign. You don't have to pick sides. And I have to agree with one thing, and we rarely praise this government. But they did make a lot of profit because they bought the Russian oil, which was banned, and India sold it.
Right.
So why not do this?
To Europe, so that you cannot really.
Why not do this?
Finger back. Rohan, what do you make of it? Do you think because you do not get you're not bombarded by Indian media, so I get in some ways it colors us whether positively
Much to
or
my
negatively.
grandmother's chagrin, I don't consume enough. She's in Calcutta. I don't consume enough Indian media for her taste.
Yeah, so it colors us one way or the other. But do you think with this entire Trump insisting on a polarized kind of world, or polarizing it even if he doesn't want to, has India kind of managed to pull off walking the middle path successfully, or that's not how you read it?
I would say that we, oddly enough, the parallels between the U.S. and the Indian economy give it a degree of insulation. What I mean by that is where the U.S. is most vulnerable is its services, right? When you talk about what we actually make, we don't make anything. We make nothing. What we have is intellectual property, so that's movies, right? That's culture, right? We have services, whether it's legal or financial or whatever else, and we sell it to the rest of the world. And then you look at India, and what are two of the largest companies and two of the most globally influential companies in India, right? Infosys and TCS, right? Neither of which are actually making a physical thing, right? But they are selling a service that isn't tariff, that is untariffable. And well, it is tariffable, but not under this current regime. And so therefore there is a degree of insulation, unlike say a Vietnam, right, which has basically become the destination du jour for anyone de-risking out of China, unlike a Vietnam, unlike a Japan, which of course has a heavy auto export business, South Korea, and of course China. So India's intellectual capital, which it has managed to build up right through, call it 3-4 generations of very difficult work, now serves as a very effective buffer to sort of mitigate the tariff threat from the U.S. Because keep in mind, India, the last statistics I saw, only 18 to 20% of the goods that you guys export actually end up in the U.S. We are your largest single trading partner, but certainly not even close to a plurality. So 26%, it actually, in my opinion, look at what Apple is doing, right? I think you guys just mentioned this, where they're literally airlifting iPhones out of India that are made in India now because of, the Modi government's sort of push to make in India, right? They are now being airlifted out of India to be sold in the US. And yes, there's a 26% tariff, but that's a heck of a lot better than 145%.
Although that is a secondary kind of, Trump may come down on that because I know they've come down on Vietnam because some of these products are made in China, assembled in India, and then exported to avoid that 124. And
yes.
Even Vietnam is that go through that it is manufactured.
Finishing point.
It's a finishing point. So effectively, a Vietnam tariff is implemented, but the goods were made in China. The same thing for the Apple components, which are assembled here, but they're made in China. So, if Trump really wants to tariff China, he may put that secondary tariff here if it's a pass-through area.
Very true, but the only thing similar to Abe, right? Modi and Trump have honestly cultivated a very meaningful relationship, at least in public. I struggle to think of another foreign leader that could have been feted with a rally in Texas the way that Modi was 5-6 years ago, right? So that relationship, both because maybe stylistically they are similar in the way they approach their base, but also there's a genuine relationship there that has taken a lot of work to cultivate. And so that actually protects India. If you look at the countries that have jumped to the front of the line, first or second in line for these deals is Japan, which has had an ongoing conversation with the US government for months now on any number of things, and Israel. And of course, Bibi Netanyahu is very intellectually and personality-wise similar to Trump. So yes, of course, theoretically, logically, there should be a risk to India should this, sort of tariff hopping thing continue. In reality, is Trump going to go out of his way to punish a perceived friend? Probably not.
I had a question of Rohan. For a lot of us in India, Trump's tariffs remind us of Modi's demonetization, in that sense that here's a policy which it's not really based on anything, and therefore it's kind of a curious thing to even critique because there's no sound economics to it, there's no expert, there's no real policy. But the overriding sentiment that demonetization sent out was that we're cracking down on terrorism, we're cracking down on corruption. And so, even though today we have data that all the money came back, all that pain was for nothing, but there's a sense in people that, he took this tough stand against corruption and no one had the balls to do it the way he did it. So, what's the overriding sentiment with Trump? With Trump's tariff, what's the emotional pitch?
Even if it didn't work, did he mean well?
Yeah.
Well, the demonetization
we have that
thing is
line,
actually,
Modi ji ne kara
it's
hai to
actually
soch samajh ke kiya
perfect.
hoga.
Yeah.
So,
No,
the same thing for
sorry.
Trump, yeah. So, yeah.
Well, the demonetization thing is perfect because, like demonetization, they had plenty of time supposedly to prepare for this. They talked about it for weeks and months. The date was maybe a surprise, of course, but then when it was actually implemented, it was total chaos. And it was a total disaster, and it was a total mess. And that is almost the scariest part to American, at least the investors, right? These guys talked about putting in tariffs back in 2024, right? They ran on it. They got elected on it. They said they were going to do it. So fine. Everyone knows these tariffs are coming. And then what do? They take a simplistic, I'm sure this went, I hope this went equally as viral in India as it did in the US. They take some ridiculously simplistic formula where they take the balance of trade, they subtract it against it, and then they divide it in half, and they add some Greek symbols to make it look very intelligent and very but it's nonsense, right? That was what months of work produced. And that terrified people because this, as many people have pointed out, is the most fundamental shift, the most fundamental economic shift that has ever happened in the US in terms of a self-inflicted, out of nowhere, let's just do it. And for there to be such little thought that went into it is terrifying. So for, and again, I'm colored by sort of the New York finance crowd that I talk to that has been hit very hard by this. So like I'm not going to the grocery store and paying 140% more for whatever goods come from China, right? Not yet, anyways. But the stock market, of course, felt it right away. And part of the day one panic, right, the 8,000 point drop in the Dow was, holy shit, these guys are just flying by the seat of their pants. They have no plan. They have no idea what they're doing, which to their credit was a big shift from the first go around because everything else, if you look at the way they're handling the deportations or the way that they're going after law schools and universities, they had a plan for everything else. This, not so much.
There is also...
But what's the sentiment? Like, what's the big sentiment that people...
It's split, right? The Wall Street folks are just losing their mind. They're going insane because the stock market is whipsawing this way and that way because there's no confidence. Consumers don't feel the pain yet, but anecdotally, I've talked to 4 or 5 people today who are moving up purchase of cars because they don't want to, they're worried they'll have to pay more, who are going out and buying new iPhones right now before the tariffs hit. So if the goal was sort of shock and awe, he's shocked and awe across the board. The problem with, the US is you have a really bifurcated electorate, right? Where you have people who, no matter what he does, are going to hate him forever. He could, parachute to their house, give them $100,000 in cash, and, they would still hate his guts. They'd spit on him. Then you have people who, like we were talking about earlier, he could slap them across the face, he could kick them while they're down, he could burn their house down, and then he'd go, thank you, Mr. President. You are such a masterful genius. I cannot wait to see what stage 2 of your brilliant plan is. So the sentiment depends on who you voted for and where you live. In the sort of more rural areas, having not been out to rural America in the last week, I can't speak to it with authority, but his base is happy. His cabinet secretaries are not lying when they say the base loves him.
There is also a view that Trump's pose for 90 days is not so much driven by the market, but by the fact that there is an increased sale of US sovereign bonds.
Yeah.
So it's from 3.5, I think it has gone to 4, more than 1%.
Yeah.
So, and that is very scary because with these bonds, the US economy, the budget,
in fact, let me just clarify to our audience before we get Rohan's in. The treasuries are basically US way of raising debt. They sell treasury bonds, and you buy a US treasury bond means you have lent the US money. It is considered the safest financial instrument in the world. The long-term US treasury bonds will have a higher return than the short-term US treasury bond, and that has been the case forever. And the only time what they call an inverted yield curve is the long-term bonds have a lower rate than the short-term bonds, which means people's view in the long term of US economy is unfavorable. And whenever that's happened, it has been followed by a recession. That is, 7 of the last 8 times, an inverted yield curve has been followed by a recession. So yes, today's paper also has reported that the bond, people dumping the US Treasury bonds in the market led to the panic. Yeah, Rohan, please go ahead.
Yes. So there was an inversion a few weeks ago, or a month ago now at this point. Sort of preceding this, there's a great line from an American political consultant, who says, if I believed in reincarnation, I originally thought maybe I want to come back as a president, or I want to come back as a pope, or as a great baseball player. But now I know I want to come back as a bond trader, because they intimidate everybody. You cannot lie to the markets. As my editor Liz Hoffman put it, you cannot bully these guys. You cannot cajole these guys. The market never lies. And the bond traders are really the ones who have the best sense, the best pulse on the economy. So yes, there was a lot of jitters about something called a basis trade, which, it's a little too technical to get into, but basically the idea is you have hedge funds who basically bet against. It's an easy way for hedge funds to make money. It's a simple way to put it, involving treasury yields. Now, normally those yields behave in a predictable fashion, right? When people sell off stocks, they want to go into treasuries. When people go out of treasuries, they want to go into stocks. It's very, sort of conventional. It's a very nice relationship. That didn't happen here. And so that was on Wednesday, right? The day that he rolled everything back. And there was a lot of worry going into, as you just mentioned, when we sell these, sort of longer dated treasuries, there are these things called primary brokers. So there are people that actually have to buy these treasuries, whether they want to or not. They're legally required to do. And then they turn around and they sell it to people. And so there was a lot of stress that this auction would go badly, that there wouldn't be demand. Now that didn't happen. That didn't materialize. The auction was actually pretty, there's pretty decent demand for it. But yes, there is a sort of popular theory, consensus, I've seen some reporting on this, that the bond market jitters coupled with the Republican lobbying are what led them to impose this 90-day pause, which again, I do not think is enough time. They're going to need to add more time to this to get these deals done.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
I had to jump into a lot of things. So I disagree a bit with Rohan and you about the services of India sort of saving their face. The services work for US citizens. Like, it's the biggest bazaar, basically, right? Biggest market. We are insulated in the effect. We are not facing the immediate effects, because no matter how you look at it, even if the manufacturing is down and everything, US still manufactures 17% of the product manufactured in the world. India is just 2.5%. Our main export is services. When the US public, US companies face the brunt of this, it will affect the services sector.
Sure.
Right? And the second part I disagree with is the immediate effect has started, because 70%, if you don't focus on China and he sort of pauses, quote unquote, pauses for the rest of the world, it's like, I remember the Matrix dialogue, like still using all the muscles except the one that matters. The Amazon sellers in US import 70%.
Yeah, from Amazon would be hit big time.
There is the supply chain, which is very important, because what happened post World War II was this system was built by US, right? It took almost 50 to 60 years to bring down tariffs. These are not tariffs, like you said, like Falkland Islands is one of the most strangest examples. People don't live there. But besides the funny things which Narangi man does, the supply chain now works that capital and the market comes from the West, the rich countries, and the HR, the manufacturing, the raw materials come from less economically developed countries. And this system was built by US.
Sure.
And now they are trying to upend it. So the result is, in a matter of few weeks, he has raised these tariffs, which has upended everything. And this gives, not only it harms the US and the world, nobody is insulated, because everybody has to bear that brunt. US bonds, besides everything else, and US dollar is the core base currency, the oil currency.
Yep.
When the bond yields go up, like China, it's a rumor, it's not confirmed, that China dumped $50 billion of treasury bonds in the market, which sent the interest rates flying. Everybody's interest rates go up.
Yeah, I mean, of course, China and US have been in the Mexican standoff forever. I mean, coming to your point of this system has been created by the US, I mean, that is, of course, is a larger picture, and we've discussed that in the past, that when the quote-unquote Washington consensus was trendy. In fact, I don't see Jagdish Bhagwati and Joseph Stiglitz being commentators anymore between the 90s and the late 2000s, there were so many books in defense of globalization, globalization and its benefits, etc. All those commentators who were major globalization advocates suddenly are quiet. But that,
well, whether the Trump administration succeeds or not, globalization is not going away.
Exactly.
It's just not.
Yeah.
And this, I think, strikes to your most fundamental point here, which is this is a fantasy land. There is no way that you're going to see a return right to that post-Second World War consensus where the only reason America's manufacturing was so great is because all the other factories didn't exist. We were the only
bombed out of
industrial
existence.
power left.
Yeah, exactly.
Period. There was no way to stick with people. So of course we were going to do great. Everyone benefits from a world in which there are well, let me pause on that. 90% of people benefit from an interconnected world where you can take advantage of each region's natural resources and populations to participate in the global market. I mean, this is a fact. The number of large conflicts has gone down, almost directly correlated to the increasing complexity and interrelatedness of global supply chains. And that says nothing about regional conflicts, which will continue to simmer to the end of time.
Sure.
But the idea of an all-encompassing war breaking out is hampered in no small part because globalization has become such a potent force.
Yeah.
Now, on the India point about this, not about services being hit by a recession, yes, absolutely. I think that were there to be a full market downturn, then yes, India would start to feel the pain in those services businesses because you would have U.S. corporates cutting spend, but they've already been cutting spend. They've been cutting spend for a year or two, and there is an open debate in the U.S. about whether we are headed for a recession or not. I mean, obviously, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan have all upped their estimates, but there is still the Fed. The government is not interested in shooting itself in the face completely, and that's honestly the only silver lining here is it's not COVID. It's not the global financial crisis. It's not even long-term capital management in the 90s, right? This is an entirely self-inflicted situation.
And it can be corrected also just as quickly as it's been caused. It doesn't have such deep-rooted, fundamentals that have gone wrong. But, it's late and we have to let Rohan go. Just one last question I had, and our wonderful colleague Jayashree isn't here, who is the furthest left from all of us. And her critique has always been that it doesn't matter whether Republicans are in power, the Democrats are in power, the people who run the US is Wall Street, big pharma, big industry, the financial sector, etc., etc. And the president is always subservient to their interests. Now, I'm not taking a judgment call on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but at least from what I see, Trump is that level of I don't give a shit, that he really doesn't give a shit about what Wall Street thinks, what the pharma lobby thinks, what any other major industry or financial lobby in the US think. So in that, has he managed to break that consistency in US politics that no matter who's in power, Wall Street and large, financial interests run US administration? And he has said, fuck you, I don't listen to anyone.
I mean, I'm a big believer in the horseshoe theory of politics, which is the far left and the far right. At some point, they come together and they're basically the same. So it's not just a leftist thought in the US anyways that big pharma is bad. Yes and no, right? I mean, bank CEOs, pharma CEOs, big business, they couldn't get Biden on the phone. They couldn't even talk to the administration. I mean, one of my colleagues actually looked at the meetings that the Biden administration took with top CEOs. It was a fraction. It's a fraction of the first Trump presidency, right? So he is a putatively pro-business CEO, president that likes to be near CEOs. These are the people who never would have hung out with him when he was just a New York real estate guy, and now they only hang out with him. But you're absolutely right. Is Big Pharma calling the shots at health and human services? No, it's not. And that's a big stressor for Big Pharma. Is the financial industry sort of plugged in and wired up as they want to be? Unless you're a crypto bro, no, not really. But the flip side of that is reality bites, right? So whether or not Big Pharma has the level of influence it used to have, when there is a measles outbreak in Texas, as there is right now, in part because of this anti-vaccination wave that for some reason has sprung up in the US, people will die from disease anyways. And so Big Pharma will, because they make the medicine, find a way to reassert control. Sure, he may ignore Jamie Dimon or Brian Moynihan, the CEO of Bank of America, but when the economy starts to teeter,
he will
he's
have
going
to
to
listen.
do what they.
Yeah,
he's going to do what they
there's
want
an
to do.
there's an
So whether or
inevitability
not they're
to
the
that.
room or not, it doesn't matter.
But
Yeah, but I just want to add before many of our subscribers point out that there is this whole anti-vaccine wave sweeping America. Like Rohan said, for some reason, some would insist that the reason is Mr. Kennedy. But there have been two.
And many would, and they would not necessarily be wrong.
Right. But Rohan, once again, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to remind our audience there's a link in the show notes. Semafor's upcoming World Economic Summit, the landing page of that, it would lead to. You can have a look and see if it interests you. And before we say goodnight and thank Rohan, do you have a recommendation that could enrich the lives of our listeners and viewers?
Vaguely topical and a little old, but I'm finally getting around to it. There's a fantastic book, Empire of Pain, which I just cracked open last night, detailing Purdue Pharma,
yes.
The company that brought America OxyContin, Big Pharma. There we go again.
Mm-hmm.
It is fascinating to actually have a great reporter peel back how interconnected what some might consider the oligarch class has always been in American history. If you go back and actually read this, it's 3 generations of influence, the Sackler family, that they managed to project across the arts, across education, all thanks to this, very not great thing, which was OxyContin. So I wouldn't necessarily say it is a fun read, but it's a helpful reminder that at the end of the day, history always repeats itself. There's nothing new about what we're seeing right now.
The Sackler family.
Yes, the Sackler family.
Thanks so much, Rohan.
Guys.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
I hope
Thanks,
you
guys.
sleep
Huge
well.
Bye, Rohan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
All right. Right, Shardul, you were saying?
So just 2 minor points. One was, of all the talks we have about Trump and what can counter him, like all of us know who has dealt with like college crowd, or you can't counter crazy with rationale. This guy is nuts. And his wife did start cryptocurrency, by the way. I just wanted to interject. Before his swearing-in ceremony. So he's essentially a crook, a scammer. And he's behaving like a mafia boss, like pretentious mafia boss. Because mafia bosses are also more, street savvy than him. The second point is, and it's sort of a philosophical point, because when I was thinking about this issue last week and we had to discuss, like, this globalization, essentially, in my head, maybe I'm wrong, but a sharing of assets which was hoarded by centuries of colonialism. Like, slowly you share your prosperity. When you start the sharing process, what happens is, like, when the privilege has to be shared or the asset has to be shared, the 2 things are bound to happen. Inevitably will happen. One, initially it will benefit the privileged one because they are already, in control of the power or asset, whatever it may be. And the second thing is, the haves will start to resent have-nots when the sharing reaches a crescendo, when it crosses a certain level. And that is what's happening to the globalization. Every Western power, now the population resents that they do not have that many privileges. NHS of UK is going bankrupt.
Yeah, and not just that, you're absolutely right. The resentment in America, if you just see the macro picture and you see the data, it is very hard to explain that you still have about 25-26% of the world economy. You have the richest, country, significant nation in the world. But
ever in human history.
But yet there is this major resentment. And, a very instructive conversation I had over last weekend, a childhood friend of mine who is as liberal as they get, of course, Indian, Jat, grew up here, moved to the US when we were, I think, 19. He's been there since. Worked in the financial sector. And he was, he says, I really like Trump. And I was trying to reason with him that I've known you forever. And so I just was listening rather than judging. And what I got is that people like him, he quit his job, he started, a startup. And he said, on Biden's time, the pandering to not work or for things that were not productive, the cultural was, like in India, it's never been an issue. It is just people like us sit around and discuss some of these issues. But the votes are still cast on gas kisko mili, ye kisko hua, or the hardcore religious,
or caste.
bigotry. So, but there the cultural wars were real. he said for small entrepreneurs like me who have, worked on Wall Street for 20, 25 years, amassed significant wealth. I mean, they have not wanting anything, but putting all that money into an enterprise. He's saying just the culture of performance has been completely replaced by the culture of wokeness. And I was trying to get an insight into his psychology. Like, why would he think Trump is a good idea? And what I realized is that, I maybe that's just one perspective, but it is a perspective that in the second term, Biden had, and I think the reason why he had such few meetings with CEOs was because I don't think he was fit to even talk to people.
Yeah.
There was no agenda. Everyone was running amok, a bit like UPS 2 second term. Whoever wanted to talk on cultural, wars was going to town with that. Someone was going to town with economic issues. Whoever was pandering to the pharma lobby. There was no cohesive message.
It's all a smoke screen.
So there was no cohesive message. So I think that kind of pissed people off, and Trump has brought all that together. So even though they say he's a despicable human being, and one more thing that he said as a personality is concerned, to make it as a real estate mogul in New York in the 70s, 80s and 90s, New York was at its worst. Crime, crooks, tough guys. To hold your own against that, you cannot be a softie. Like many of your liberal media, treat him as some privileged softie. He said he may be insane. He may be an idiot.
He is privileged though.
But of course, but he's no privileged softie. Like he says you cannot get one of these Rothschild children or something who have lived in there to make it in the real estate world in New York. You'd be killed overnight. To make it in the New York at that time, you have to be really tough. And he is tough. That was the kind of, I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but I'm just putting a point of view across.
May I say something about
please.
Trump? So what your friend said, with respect, I would say, it's like tail wagging the horse, the argument. Because these are selective interpretations of Trump's business model. He bankrupted himself 7 times. The laugh, like he bankrupted a casino in
because always wins
Atlantic
his
City, which is, he talks about the art of the deal. He didn't write the book. Somebody
Also,
else did.
you must watch the movie Apprentice, where they actually show who his influence is. Who's a very famous or infamous lawyer, Roy Cohen, who was there during the whole McCarthy. And some of the ruthless things that he learns are actually from Roy, who he really fucks over by the end of the movie.
Yeah, he has no friends. In fact, this whole thing that he's a friend of Modi, he'll throw anyone under the bus. Yeah.
He has to, his personal counsel was in jail, who is against him now doing podcast. And for what? For campaign money fraud. Because he paid the campaign money to his mistress when his wife was pregnant. This guy has no limits. But the point is, he's famous because he's funny. He understands TV.
Yeah, exactly.
He understands TV. And America is a nation obsessed with television.
Like reality TV show.
Yeah, exactly.
The perfect reality TV.
He was shown I remember as a kid the first season of The Apprentice. I was like, this is interesting. What's happening?
And the thing is, and you can make out he's obsessed because even if he has nothing to say, he wants to hold a press conference every day and just be on TV saying something to make the headlines, even if there's nothing of consequence to say.
He's immensely watchable.
He's very watchable.
He's telegenic. It's fun.
It is fun.
Just make him the TV president. He'll be happy. And the nation would be fine, that nation. But the problem with the base in US now is, it's so divided. The people who watch Fox News don't consume any other media.
No, also I think I was watching their business channels, the right of center business channels. I mean, dude, they put even, I'm not joking, they put Navika and Rahul Shivshankar and Amish Devgun to shame.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
But I saw that a lot of the experts who were coming on were criticizing.
Yeah, but the anchors, you have to see what's the big deal if we have to lose. When we go to war, Americans have sacrificed so much. This is also war. It's just not a conventional war. I mean, it's gone to a level which, what you're saying, it's just so polarized that it's completely insane.
But on this wokeness thing, I think it's very difficult for us to understand. But there is this very strong culture war that's happening because we don't have those issues.
We don't have.
We're not.
I mean, we do have those issues, but they're not significant in numbers.
They're not significant in numbers, and it's. Actually, I'd say we don't. Because we're still kind of...
We are a different society. And may I say, what you're talking about, the experts, that's mainstream media. Nobody watches that. They stopped watching it 10 years ago.
Although I think that's
I'm saying they're on Fox.
Yeah,
Fox,
yeah, but there are a lot of, other ones. But complete that thought that you were saying.
But I was saying that, yeah, it's very difficult for us to fathom why it's such a divisive kind of thing. But a lot of people, it really impacts them there. The wokeness culture it's almost, I mean, people are very repulsed by it.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult for us to understand it because we don't have that. But it's a reality. I don't think we can just brush it aside and say,
Yeah, and even some, conventionally liberal folk are, I mean, I know so many people, they don't speak up about it, but they're saying, I don't like sending my kid to school because some of the stuff that they're teaching in school, I don't approve of it. And if I say anything, I'm considered a trumpeter. But it is, yeah, it's...
I was told, just like Modi, Trump is also, being worshipped in his country. When he goes to an auditorium, the photo of Christ will be smaller. And his picture is going to be bigger. And
Really?
somebody in the US,
Yes.
somebody in the US told me, so whenever he goes to the auditorium, Christ will be a smaller one. His picture is going to be a bigger one. And then each meeting first begins with a song in praise of him.
Yeah.
So
he's having that on his birthday to have a military parade. Yeah. Who the hell does that? And I think it's going to cost 90 million or something. I mean, where is Dodge, about making things
So
efficient?
eventually start calling him Messiah and like the messenger of Christ. But I'll give you an analogy which will make you understand the wokeness issue in essence. Do you remember which was the actor? I forget Bollywood actor names. Yeah. Sushant Singh Rajput, craziness. Now people like us were like, what the hell is happening here? But people were crazy about it. These issues were pent up by these culture wars, and like Alex Jones was a big player in that before he was disbanded by the court. And there are many, many other. These issues are propped up so that the public in United States do not, make a consensus in voting terms on issues which are pertinent to them, like, which is a very common one, and I mentioned it before, many people would have, the shooting issue every day,
Sure.
school shootings.
That
and
never
everything.
becomes a electoral
because
issue.
Pharma issue, he just gave an example of the Sackler family. And there are many, many issues inherently which legitimize big money corruption in US government. And these things are designed so that public doesn't talk about them because easy to blame someone else rather than working on it inherently. And we have same issues like this.
Yeah, of course, that's one of the biggest conundrums that the big majority of the US want gun control, yet it never gets done by the party.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the next issue. But before we do that, I'd like to remind everybody to pay to keep news free. So there's a QR code flashing. This is your subscription chance because we don't take any ad money. And as you've seen, advertising. In fact, now Mr. Stalin has also understood the value of giving ads to Delhi newspapers. Did you see the full front page? In Keds, jet
All
black
papers
hair.
have.
He's in his 70s, right? Jet black hair, wearing Keds, looking young, trendy and youthful energy, vigor. Full front page, Stalin taking country forward and all that. So all newspapers had that front page paid for Tamil Nadu government. To all my Tamil friends, your money. My Tamil brothers and sisters, our money. Not that I pay any taxes in Tamil Nadu. We don't take that. The next day, there was a big front page ad by central government ministry paid for by your money. Thank you so much. But we don't take any of that. The QR code, pay to keep news free because journalism will only survive if you pay for it. Otherwise, it will serve those in public. And we have a NL project, an investigation jointly by News Minute and Newslaundry on police excesses. There's a QR code flashing next to Shardool's face right now. And Shardool will tell you why you should contribute to this investigation.
Okay, I'll do that in Hindi because like my creative mind works in Hindi.
Yes.
तो वकील, पुलिस और पत्रकार की याद लोगों को तभी आती है जब ज़रूरत पड़ती है, उससे पहले कोई पूछता नहीं. और जब ज़रूरत पड़ती है तो ईमानदार चाहिए होता है. तो ट्रंप ने टैरिफ अभी थोड़े दिन के लिए वापस ले लिए हैं. थोड़े से पैसे बचेंगे, उसमें से थोड़ा जैसे कि आप लोन्स की किश्त देते हैं, फिर इंश्योरेंस की देते हैं. इसे इंश्योरेंस मानिए ज़िंदगी का कि आपको सही खबरें मिलनी चाहिए. और उसके लिए विज्ञापन पर नहीं, लोगों के ईमान पर भरोसा करें. न्यूज़ लॉन्ड्री को सब्सक्राइब करें.
Arey, very nice. Excellent. Love the pitch. I think Manisha also has a pitch.
No, I was going to say that the best ad that came out this week was on Midday front page by Rahul Kannal, the famous guy who led the charge against Kunal Kamra, beat him up. Brought the whole comedy club down. He put up an ad celebrating humanitarian Anant Ambani ji's birthday. His foundation, Rahul N. Kanal Foundation, has listed a number of things that they would do on humanitarian Anand Ambaniji's birthday with lasting impression. Dog food distribution all over Mumbai.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It's on
And
the
this
front
ad
page
was taken
by midday.
by the newspaper that was reporting how he led this mob.
I wonder if they even reported on that. But yeah, ration kit distribution and happy birthday Anand Ambaniji. I love Mumbai. Rahul Kanal Foundation. He has a foundation apparently.
Chalo. Foundation. The foundations are strong. You see, that's the thing about India. So you can pause this video while you pull out your phone and scan the QR code, or click on the link in the show notes and contribute to good journalism, independent journalism, free from the influence of large corporations or advertisers. And
Or
here
Rahul
I
Kanal.
shall... Sorry?
Or Rahul Kanal.
Or Rahul Kanal, exactly. Wonderful foundation such as his. And I'll introduce our next guest, who is Tara Krishnaswamy, joining us from Bangalore. Thank you, Tara.
My pleasure, Abhinandan.
And are you at the studio of our wonderful partner organization, the News Minute?
That's right.
Wonderful.
My now familiar studio.
Yes, please say hi to the gang over there. To our audience, would like to formally introduce Tara. Tara is a Bangalore-based political consultant, gender and civic activist, and she also works on federalism, which is a main area of focus for her. She co-founded Political Shakti, which is a non-partisan collective dedicated to increasing women's representation in Indian state assemblies and the parliament. And she has also been the co-founder of Citizens for Bengaluru. It's a grassroots movement addressing urban governance issues. So thank you, Tara, for joining us. I'll let you just give us the context of this Tamil Nadu Governor and Chief Minister battle, which is not dissimilar to what has been happening in Kerala, Punjab, and even New Delhi. West Bengal. But there, Mr. Ravi has taken it to a different level, not just with his public utterances and his behavior and conduct at some events where he and the state cabinet is together, but even in withholding bills. So can you give us the context of this culmination of the Supreme Court order, which is not the first? And do you think this will make any difference where past observations and orders of the Supreme Court haven't?
Yeah, that's a great question about the past observations in particular. So this drama has been playing out actually since 2020s. This is the irony that it's been playing out since the previous government in Tamil Nadu, prior to the current government, which was elected in 2021. So this is the DMK government, and prior to this was the ADMK government, which was elected when Jayalalitha was still alive, and she was the chief minister until she passed away in 2016, and their tenure continued until 2021. And all the 10 bills for which there has been a quote pocket veto is what they call it in that parlance, basically withholding of assent indefinitely, which they're not allowed to do, but kind of dancing around that assent by not acting on the bill or sending it back for clarification, but then holding it after the clarification, or continuing to hold it after the assembly passes it, not sending it up to the president. And these cases have been filed, and every time they come up to the Supreme Court for hearing, again, making motions of as if acting on the bill, but not acting on it. So since that has been going on, and interestingly, all of these bills have to do with either appointments to universities, or other kind of appointments that the state government is being prevented from making. So when it came up to when the hearing finally happened, the Supreme Court seems to have, and the judgment is not uploaded yet to my knowledge, but the Supreme Court seems to have clipped the wings and reminded the governor of his charter and not to breach that charter. Which is to define that assent needs to be given within a fixed time. And even if it were to be sent up to the president, it needs to happen within fixed time. So that's the sum and substance of that. Now, to your other question of certainly union governments over decades, and it is not just this government, In fact, I think the Vajpayee government in 2000 had appointed a commission under Justice Venkatachalaya, who is a Bangalorean, who had recommended this, and that commission had tabled the report in 2002, again when Mr. Vajpayee was still Prime Minister of the country, and recommended that term limits be set for how long the governor can drag the assent issue. And that was not acted on. So not only repeated judicial recommendations, which have been made over decades for this very issue of assent and bounding the period within which the governor has to give assent. That has not been acted on. Even commissions and committees that have been constituted by the prime ministers themselves that have delivered reports either within the tenure or beyond, they also haven't been acted on. So certainly the union government has not been acting in good faith as far as this particular issue is concerned.
Raman sir, you've been observing this for a long time. You've had a accomplished and long career as a journalist. There have been Supreme Court orders and observations when it comes to the Lieutenant Governor Delhi versus the Delhi government, the Kejriwal government, and suddenly all that animosity has vanished now with, again, today there was an ad with Modi ji and the Nadda ji and the Chief Minister of Delhi all in one ad. The Punjab government versus the governor, also the court, I don't recall whether it was the Supreme Court, but it was the Punjab or Haryana High Court. Will this mean that there is going to be any change? And while this government, no doubt, has taken it to a level, or at least that's what we hear, is that the case? Or was the misuse of governors, it was always there, but was it at this level earlier when you were covering politics, let's say in the 90s, early 2000s, etc.?
No, earlier, say before 2014, we never witnessed, this kind of brazenness that we face, post 2014. And I feel that whatever decisions that are coming out from the Supreme Court, even that is not going to deter the spirit of all the future governors that this government is going to appoint, in the states. Maybe the brazenness will vary. In West Bengal, if you see the present vice president, when he was the governor, you could have seen the level of, the bitterness that
and some of the things he said was so, I mean, it was as if the governor didn't want to get along even.
And as the Supreme Court has decided about Ravi, about Tamil Nadu, if you see in Kerala, the case is coming up next week, I think. In Kerala also, there are about 7-8 bills which are pending for the this assent of the governor. So we did not witness so much before 2014. There were some problems. The governor is going to send the bill to president, then the president will send it back. But every time when it was sent back, to the government, basically there was a consensus and it always became an act. Mostly it became an act. There were very few, if you, I don't have the data right now, if you see the, conflict between governor and the chief ministers with the Supreme Court, you won't find many.
As many as
the increase is tremendous after 2014. So I think, and the worst part is, despite the Supreme Court orders and observations, this just
carries on.
The governors carry on. I mean, that's the.
There's no shame.
Problem. I think that there is a clear direction from the center that you need to create problem, and only then you will be your performance will be. Look at we are going to do a story. I mean, you spoke about the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. So I think let the 100 days be over of the present government. So we will do a story, definitely. I mean, didn't you notice that in the previous government with AAP, he used to issue, I think, 1 or 2,
public
more than two, press statements. Press statements clearly very telling the AAP government that they are not performing well, on the grounds. He himself used to make those. He used to travel and he used to make news that the water is not coming in this locality, which is not his work. This is not the left hand. Now see, in the past 1 month, ever since this government has come in, how many times he has gone to the localities, and how many press statements he has issued.
Sure.
So I think
right.
the message is loud and clear despite the Supreme Court this year.
I mean, it's unfortunate. I'd like to come to Shardool for his views, but before that, Tara, two specific questions, since this is, somewhat of you're an area expert on such issues. A, often we see op-eds that the role of governor should be abolished. Is that just a knee-jerk reaction? Does it actually serve a check and balance, or it genuinely just serves as a roadblock? And B, is there a provision that a governor cannot be slapped with a contempt of court? Like, for example, if someone like us disobeyed a direct previous order of the Supreme Court, there is no doubt it would be treated as contempt of court. Somehow the governors are getting away with clear contempt of court, but they are not slapped with contempt of court. Is there a legal reason for that? Or it's just the Supreme Court not wanting to cause a constitutional crisis? And B, is there any benefit of a governor's position, or is it just a drain on resources? Do we need to dodge it?
Yeah, we certainly need to bring governors under I'm not a lawyer, but we certainly need to bring governors under the same judicial purview that, the rest of the authorities have in terms of being subject to contempt of court. And that is not happening today, for sure. In terms of abolishing the role of the governor, see, you have the way the governor's office came about clearly is to do with colonies and the need for a remote government like run out of London to be able to monitor the colonies. And this happened at a time when the provincial governments were not elected and that is in fact ironically what the Congress fought against, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. And the provincial governments were not elected, and therefore you needed somebody sitting in the provinces that could report back to the crown as to what was happening and, keep it under their thumb. But for the Constituent Assembly had extensive debates and in their wisdom, especially around governing the country as a single unit. And we must remember, when we go back to the Constituent Assembly debates, that India did not look the way it does today. They were still trying to integrate provinces, through both persuasion and through, in a sense, conquest, right, by sending the army in there. So those were the fears that also played in their minds as they decided that you need the position of a governor. Now, the issue, you have to go one of two ways, in my opinion, which is today you're in a quasi-federal setup, and you are no longer worried about territorial integrity the way you were worried about then, at least. They're dramatically reduced. And it is also very clear, if I look at it, that while India has had repeated instances of executive overreach, for example, you have the executive trying to bulldoze homes even before the judiciary, weighs in and says that something is a crime, right? Even when an FIR is filed, they go around acting on it, or an encounter. What is that? And you have had union government overreach into state issues over and over and over. So, whether it's the NEP, the NEET, in so many cases, just dismissing of elected governments, you have union government overreach. What you don't have is state overreach. So it is not that the states of the country are trying to legislate where they shouldn't be legislating. It is the union trying to do that. It is the executive trying to do that, but not the legislative of the states. So therefore, I would say that the trust deficit is towards the union, is towards the governorship. It is not towards the state. So time has come to make one of two choices. Either you define the powers of everything from the appointment of the governor to his or her term and powers to the termination or the impeachment of the governor. Either you define that in a way that it is bilateral. Today's issue is that the governor is unilaterally chosen by the union government. In all the matters that concern both the union and the states, the union alone is choosing. Why should the election commission be decided by the union alone? Why should the finance commission appointments be decided by the union alone? They are not trying to serve at the pleasure of the union. They are trying to apportion funds between the states and the union. Similarly, they are trying to conduct elections across the states and for the union. And similarly, when it comes to governors, why not have the same electoral college wherein the similar to what we have for a presidency? And similarly, since the governor himself or herself functions at the behest of the Council of Ministers, the Council of Ministers can choose to recommend to dismiss the governor. So whether it comes to term, whether it comes to termination, whether it comes to appointments, whether it comes to their powers, either you have to well define it, or you have to say we will abolish the post of the governor and vest those duties. And constitutional experts have weighed in and they have said some of the duties can go to the Speaker of the House, some of the duties can go to the Chief Secretary. If there is a breakdown of law and order, the Chief Secretary can choose to, ask for the President's rule. Or they could go to the Election Commission even in certain cases. So that a constitutional body of constitutional experts can decide where to apportion the powers. But the time has come to make one of two decisions. Either you, prescribe and circumscribe the office of the governor very clearly from appointment to powers to term to impeachment, or you decide to, or you abolish the role of the governor and you subsume it within the other existing roles. Continuing this way is untenable.
Right. And also,
every time a state goes to court, it is actually a constitutional crime. We don't realize it, but that is what it is.
Exactly.
You're going against a constitutional body.
In fact, I was just about to say that every week when we read the headlines, we read between 10 to 13 headlines, that is the number we keep. At least 3 of them, and sometimes way more, are about what's happening in the Supreme Court in a matter that concerns one of the governments. So the fact that the courts have to weigh in repeatedly on governance issues because the center and the state cannot seem to get along, or the police is, overreaching, or the ED is overreaching. Today, the ED whining about, our rights are being impeded, and the Supreme Court says, hell, what about the rights of the people who you're going at? So, and also to the point that Tara made, which is the worst case scenario, governor's rule, right? President's rule, a complete breakdown. I think on that of the last few years, the bar has been set so high that unless there is a catastrophe which is threatening to wipe out a significant percentage of the population, if you go by precedents, I mean, the bar has been set too high. Manipur did not warrant president's rule. Gujarat did not warrant president's rule. Once those two are seen as the bar, then it is very unlikely anyone would need to call for president's rule. But if these two were not...
Manipur was a case where you really needed it because there was such a... It was a
complete
state
breakdown.
Of civil war.
Even
and
now.
There was such a there was lack of trust completely when it came to...
It should have happened earlier.
Chief Minister.
Even in today's newspaper, today's Indian Express has that report where, and I don't want to name the specific groups involved, but some abandoned houses have been taken over. What happened in Kashmir, in the 80s and 90s, people who fled because of fearing safety because they were in an area dominated by the other community, their homes have been taken over in spite of the court saying this should not happen and the state can do nothing about it. So the bar has been set so high that if that is the worst case scenario, you don't need the governor because it's never going to be called upon. Yes. But on this constitutional crisis being repeatedly...
I have to say one thing, like Manipur's examples all of us gave. Like, do you remember the Uttarakhand example when the MLA shifted from one place to another and governor kept interfering, the Supreme Court had to step in. So the overarching point, like, under which I'll make a couple of others, is that lately we have seen that there is no way to penalize, the malified or malintentioned governance, which you can see is being done deliberately, but there is no way to penalize it. Like, for so long, people in public discussions have been harping about the lack of reforms, the delay of reforms. This has to be addressed somehow. So, saying that, I do think that this judgment would be a bit better because what it does is, it under Article 141, Supreme Court judgment is a law now. So, it's now law of the land. Now, what this does is, this gives tools for the government, state governments, to quickly, obstruct the obstruction in their own governance, right? They can quickly do it because the timelines are defined. It's 1 month. And one other thing they did is they set aside any action taken by the President of India on the basis of government's recommendation. So, in essence, decision which a state cabinet makes, you may agree to it or not, that's a different thing. But the decision, the bill that has been passed by now an elected state government cannot be shut down by the president either. Which is a good tool, and there are specific timelines. So I do think this will help. One last point, like I prescribe to the view, and people may disagree, that the time to abolish this governor institution is now. It should have been abolished 20 years ago, but it should be done now. There is no use for it. Everybody has seen, like Raman sir said, after 70s and 80s, we had seen that the brazen use of governors and center's power had stopped. More or less, it was still happening, but since 2014, since this government has come into power, they have again started doing with the governors what Indira Gandhi used to do back then. That is 50 years ago. I was not even alive. The time to get rid of this is now, and it is just a burden on exchequer, nothing else. What does governor do? He goes and inaugurates some places, gives some prizes, nothing else.
Actually, before 2014. That is essentially what a governor's role was. Just inaugurate things, be this soft, feel-good person, going for some flower show. It was never... And actually, it is the biggest kind of, I think, dhabba on this BJP government since 2014, how they've misused this post.
Completely.
It is so naked, it is so brazen, and it's such an affront to people who are voting. People have elected this government, clearly, conclusively. There's no reason for the governor to interfere in what this government is doing. Forget the constitutionality of it, but the morality of... And, okay, the BJP is using you, but this governor, does he have no concern for his own image? You're not going to be this powerful forever, no?
Do you
not care about what you...
He was in CBI. How do you think he has sailed?
That ship has sailed.
But it's so embarrassing what you're doing. I don't understand. I don't understand how drunk you can be on power to just forget that you will be judged for it. You will go down in history as one of the worst.
But will they is my question. For example, let me take the example, and Tara, I'll just come to you. Let's go to Najib Jung. When the first AAP government had come to power, Najib Jung was the lieutenant governor and used to create such problems for the state government. It was clear, it was unwarranted. It came from a position of either he didn't like Arvind Kejriwal or he had been instructed by the centre. Najib Jung, and while they said, one should not mention religion, was Muslim. Is Muslim. Now he has been completely quiet. The twice where his name has come up in the last few years after he has been retired as lieutenant governor is his dissatisfaction with, in some subtle form, with the government, whether it was election related. How many people call out Najib Jung for the bullshit he caused when he was lieutenant governor? Now you're the victim. But when you were in power, you did exactly what you were told.
Yes.
Is Najib Jung judged for it today? He is still a quote-unquote respectable member of society. Yes. Will Mr. Saxena be judged for it? He will still quote-unquote be a respectable member of society. Mr. Ravi, my personal view is, by seeing his speeches and just his conduct, it is a very superficial and shallow way. I think that man is Trump level unhinged. So I don't think
Let's give him a compliment, I think.
He's a chamcha.
You can't even
but he's unhinged. I don't think he's aware of how people think. He's in his own,
He's a sycophant of the worst kind.
The thing is that they all are representative of the central government.
Yes.
And the central government has given a very clear instruction in a state where you don't have a BJP government. If you can obstruct their work most, you will be judged by that. So, for example, our vice president, he has been rewarded.
He's been rewarded.
And now in Rajya Sabha, the way he is acting, I think maybe he will further rewarded to the president. So I think the message is very clear from the central government, and that's why these things are happening.
Tara?
Yeah, it's not just an instruction, it's also that we will take care of you.
Yeah, you will get something.
Take care of us, we'll take care of you.
So it's more than that, right? The term of the governor is not fixed. It's at the pleasure of the president, which in other words means the pleasure of the Union Council of Ministers, the union government. So fixing the term to say it's 5 years will itself relieve that position, that role of the uncertainty around losing office if you don't play to the tunes of the union government. That is one. Second is, there have been study after study that says more than 70-80% of appointed governors are either political aspirants or retired judges or retired civil servants. This is exactly how a governor shouldn't be appointed. And those are the kinds of people that end up getting appointed. So we know from the history of India, and it's not just after 2014, repeatedly that this office has been abused to the pleasure of the union government. Third thing is, the same DMK government in 1973, in 1970, they commissioned the Rajamanar Committee report, which is the very first report on center-state relations. And after that was tabled, in 1973, the CM Karunanidhi called for the abolishing of the post of the governor, because that is what the Rajamanar Committee recommended. So this is not a new thing that we are hearing. I mean, the abuse had started way back.
50 years ago. 50.
1973, right? And giving these very reasons we are still sitting talking about, right? And the last thing I'd say, while we rejoice about this particular verdict of the Supreme Court, the Kerala cases are coming right up, and the Kerala government has made a request asking for the same two-judge bench, asking for the same bench to handle the case. But the CJI has not committed, and they may well assign it to a different bench. Now, think about this. If they assign it to a different two-judge bench, those two judges could themselves differ, in which case this gets further protracted.
Yes.
Second, they could actually go and give a verdict that is entirely or significantly different from how this bench has judged it, which means that it will get thrown up to a constitutional bench.
Yes.
Which means that at the end of it, this could be overturned, right? So it really depends. We are now sitting, we know that there is, and I go back to it, we see union government overreach, we see executive overreach. And union government could very well influence what is happening, right? Potentially. We've seen that. So it's not it's not dry yet. The paint is not dry yet.
Right. But thank you so much, Tara, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you in our studio here one day. But before we let you go, would you have a recommendation that could enrich the lives of our listeners?
It is Truth, Love and a Little Malice by Khushwant Singh, which is an old book. And people are they have quite strong opinions about him. But nevertheless, he is an extraordinary writer and he is hilarious. So if you want to be entertained and educate yourself, on opinions, of course, it's quite an interesting book to read.
Right. But thank you so much, Tara, for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again sometime. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Now for the emails, I'd like to remind everybody we have a new system on how we will be reading out the emails. Each of us, Hafta members, will be taking turns every week. We will curate anywhere between 4 to 6 emails depending on the length. And we will write out only those, and the rest will actually be collected. And every 6th week, we will have one NL Hafta special on just the emails. And this was done so that we don't miss emails. We don't hurriedly read them. We actually have response to each email, while also not reducing or disincentivizing you from sending your feedback, because it was getting very long in the haftas, because our emails are getting from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50. So now that is the system we've come up with. We hope it works. We have done that after a lot of deliberation. We only entertain the emails of subscribers. So if you're a subscriber and you want to give us your feedback, you want to tell us what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, what we can do better, feel free to criticize us and call us out. Mail us at podcasts@newslaundry.com. I repeat, podcasts@newslaundry.com. Please try to keep your email below 150 words. We may make exceptions, but it will be very rare. So please try to keep it below that. Or you can click on the link in the show notes below. It will open out a form for you and you can give your feedback there. There, it is automatically limited to 150 words just to help you make your thoughts a little concise. Divgan says, "Hey NL team, hope you're all doing great. Sending all the strength for the great work you guys do. My question to the panel is, what can be done for the great Indian litter bug? Be it places of worship, heritage parks, public transport, the Indian litter bug finds their way to make it filthy. How can this be addressed is never an issue for our legislators." So, Divgan, I will throw that open to the panel. Manisha, what do you think? How can we address this tendency of Indians?
I think this is where Modi should have actually used his authoritarianism. He should have really kind of come up with a police state sort of law on this. I think we really need that. It's a question of, I often wonder that when you're traveling in other countries, one caste is a very huge role. I think the fact that only a certain section of people are given this responsibility to clean our country, and there's no incentive for them in it. Forget wages, there's no dignity, there's no proper procedure, there's no equipment. And that's the sole reason why I think I really feel that it's not our job. It's okay to just throw shit and someone else will pick it up for us. And it's really ingrained. And so I think the one place where Modi could have used all his popularity, his mandate, instead of doing Jhadu and Swachh Bharat, he should have come up with really like insanely strict Singaporean level laws on
Good
littering.
point. In fact, I'll make sure I keep this in mind next time when you leave after lunch and I'm cleaning up the table where you leave all your tissues lying around. I must keep that in mind. You know, people Abhinandan साफ कर देगा. अरे सर मैं झूठ नहीं बोल रहा. जब भी जाती है उसका टेबल मैं साफ कर रहा होता हूँ. यहाँ टिश्यू, वहाँ पेपर, यहाँ पर कुछ, यहाँ पर ज्ञान फैल रही है. बताओ. Hypocrisy की सीमा होती है दोस्तों. मित्रों, what is your solution?
I will go to another aspect of this. Like I think because we don't feel ownership for the public spaces. Like in India, your home is barely your own space. Most of the time, you only have your room, and you don't think they belong to you because our government exists to, and public institutions exist to create problems in our lives. So we, like in India, generally, public don't feel like in some temples it happens, they clean it. But again, it's a matter of faith. But in general, we as society, as citizens, don't feel the sense of ownership for our public spaces. So whatever happens outside is not our problem.
But I feel that sense of ownership also comes when the government makes a space.
Yes.
Like for example, the metro. Now everyone was saying that, oh, people are just going to litter, pan ki peak phekenge. But no, people were given a good infrastructure and they really took care of it.
Yeah.
The metro is by and large very clean.
No, but metro is very streamlined in unidirectional system. Think of a park. Like, in a well-to-do neighborhood, parks do fine because people, essentially because of their own ego or financial motivation, have that impetus that we need to take care of this. But the moment you move to middle income or lower income neighborhoods, that park is not yours because anybody, like even a mid-level policeman would come and suddenly you lose that ownership.
Sure. So
when I started my career way back in 36 years ago, so as an ideal reporter, I mean in Delhi at least, you first want to do a story on JB Road where
the red light area,
or you want to do a story on the sweepers. So my first story was on the sweepers. I just wanted to understand the sweeper, and I still remember it was one full page story, either published in Patriot or National Herald. I mean, I had done either of them and I got 500 rupees for that. This story basically, for the first time I witnessed that how the caste system has been reinforced. I mean, I found that to my surprise, I mean, I was an idol. So to my surprise that all of them were Balmikis. I mean, the NDMC, MCD and Delhi Cantonment, there were 3 civic organizations who were hiring these sweepers. Okay, and these sweepers, there was no, they were part-time kind of job. They were not paid, properly, fully. I mean, the scale-wise pay, like the clerks get it or the peons get it. So I saw that, and since then this system has not broken so far because again. We did a story on, I got many stories done on scavengers. So they also come from the same caste, mostly. Very few, maybe if there are 10 persons, engaged in the job of scavengers, I could see only 2 of them, who have come from different other states and they were living in abject poverty. So they have joined them, but otherwise, I think the entire mental setup that we have towards cleanliness is casteist. So first of all, we need to break that. And then the personal conduct. Yes, I don't think government can government definitely have a role in this.
At least with
But
collection.
the societal,
Yeah, I think the societal change will, of course,
is
be
more
slower.
important.
But I think this is actually one of the lower hanging fruit, like in Delhi at least. Education and healthcare was a very low hanging fruit, which the AAP grabbed onto in the first term. They did a great work, and which is why they got such a resounding victory. There's actually low hanging fruit to begin with. You have to flood areas with dustbins and waste paper baskets. There's so many public areas where there is no place to throw. I remember beaches in Madras, at least when I had gone, there were dustbins every few hundred meters. Goa, there's nothing to throw. You have to have places where people can throw. You got to just flood it. That could lead to, small scale industries having to manufacture eco-friendly bags. Now you get biodegradable garbage bags
No,
also.
simple thing like you see around these chola bhatura shops now, those thermocol plates every morning. There's a heap of those plates. We have pattal.
Exactly.
We've had this for so long. I don't know why it's
So
just
there is
not implemented.
Actually, this is, I think, a low-hanging fruit, but perfectly solvable. Then
Yeah, and Modi would get a lot of goodwill if he managed to do this.
but if Swachh Bharat was not just a slogan. This is from
Alright.
Vicky. It's longer than our prescribed limit, but I've made an exception. You will see why. I've been a member for nearly 8 years, shaped by my time living both in blue states in the US. Since 2024 election cycle, I've closely followed your coverage of US politics. I value your global lens. I'd like to offer some detailed feedback where I think you're missing the mark. Your take on Donald Trump, Musk and Dodge often feel overly simplistic and naive, the mirror of the framing I'd expect from left-leaning US outlets like CNN or Washington Post, quick to critique but slow to explore details. Dodge too gets dismissed without dissecting its appeal or feasibility. This reliance on a single narrative feels lazy. Anand and Manisha haven't left the show, but when they're absent from episodes, the difference is stark. Without their voice to stir the pot, it turns into an echo chamber. Noted. Of course, I'm not reading the whole thing. I'm only reading 150 words. Also, I'm not calling for a total rethink, just more rigor and variety. You've got an audience that trusts you to cut through the noise, especially in the US politics, from outsider's view, invite some diverse views. Thank you for that, because there are 3 or 4 specific recommendations you have of how we can make Hafta better. Thank you for that feedback, Vicky. We have noted that, and in fact, we'll try to do that with the guests we invite. I didn't read all 325 words, but I hope I gathered the essence of your letter without using AI. And this letter is also over 150 words. I will try to concise it, but it's important I read this letter because it is very relevant for the times we live in. This is, SH, I'll give your initials because just for your safety, I don't want to give your full name. Maybe you were just a little absent-minded and you don't mention your name. SH says, 2 weeks before a certain political party tore down the habitat where Kunal Kamra performed his contentious set, I was paid a visit by Karyakartas of a party for contributing to a festival, which was Shivaji Jayanti. I politely refused, for starters, to run a clinic, and I will not, although SH has told us what kind of clinic it is. Being a single mother, running a clinic, there are huge overheads. SH, she has been dipping into her savings to stay afloat. To top of that, BMC has ravaged the entire road in front of the clinic. So basically, there's already financial stress. SH said no. When I refused to give the money, 3 men got aggressive, demanding to talk to a man. Sorry, no man here, just little old me running this joint. They took pictures of my clinic and threatened they'd show me gundagardi. I know the vandalism they're capable of. It is historically famous. So I took measures, informed the landlady, the building committee got CCTV footage, put, etc., etc. It's a struggle trying to do good, honest business in this city. Why must you live in fear? Mr. Piyush Goyal, are you listening? Before payloading Gyan, can you provide security to even doctors? But Mr. Goyal will payload Gyan. Aap kya kar rahe hain? Dude, that guy gives everybody a headache. He should just stay home, man.
I think he's an MP from Bombay itself.
He's just so annoying. He's just such a...
Very annoying.
And he has this pompous...
Yes.
तूने किया क्या
The
life में यार?
pompousness.
He's easily the worst of the entire cabinet of Modi. Then SH goes to say, I have a bone to pick with Kamra. He must have anticipated some blowback for the bold political commentary he made. If I could foresee vandalism for a smaller issue, how could he not? He performed the set in many locations but chose to upload only the recording of the time he did at the Habitat Mumbai. And now the issue about Book My Show delisting him from their platform and not sharing audience data with him between 2017 and 2025. Why didn't he request the audience for the details? So as a healthcare provider, even I pay online aggregator for online visibility, but patient details are always shared with us. So SH, regarding this, I mean, I know how Book My Show, etc. work. They don't share details, data with the person.
I don't think they should either. It may be a violation of...
So, I mean, that there's technical issue there, but I hope you can deal with these people and the police does, do their job, although some video footage has emerged when they went to vandalize that place. There was a cop with them, with that mob.
Yeah.
So then Deepankar says, hello, Manisha did raise the issue of dissonance of Muslims have-nots but not touched. The divide between Ashraf and Pashmanda is real. For example, a study by an AMU faculty has shown that while Ashrafs are only 15% of population, they represent 85% for 40 odd MP positions held by Muslims since independence. On the Hyderabad agitation, the city has a long tradition. Osmania University, for example, was a hub of Telangana agitation. 3. The point of colonial clubs being in city centres for few is a great point. Some snapshots of some areas by clubs: city, Tollygunge Club, 100 acres in Kolkata, Bangalore Club, 11 acres, Delhi Gymkhana Club, 27 acres, Roshnara Club, 27 acres. The IITs are still called by old names like IIT Bombay, IIT Madras, as they were established by Acts of Parliament. Same with IIMs and many others. Thank you, I didn't know that. Vishnu says, short and sweet letter, 84 words. Hi team, in my opinion, letters have been way for subscribers to be part of the podcast. It is also a reason to subscribe, as Abhinandan always said. Only subscriber letters will be read in the podcast. I feel like I have been left out since my last letter was not in the podcast, or I didn't see if it was read out. It was about how US is behind India in extorting states with federal funding. This is probably because of what I mentioned first. So Vishnu, your letter will be read out. I don't know if you're the same Vishnu, but a certain Vishnu has written 3 emails. And we will, read out all 3 in that special episode. But yes, you're right. We want subscribers to feel part of this and evolve our Newslaundry product as we grow. And that can only be done through your ideas as well. And finally, Akshit's letter. 3 points. Renewed my subscription. You folks are the best. RK Sir mentioned 43 crore viewers of cricket final. If you refer to numbers on the top right, that's total views, not viewers. You can see it subtly written there. So Hotstar used to basically, they used to pump up the numbers for Jio. Also, cricket is a game, not a sport. I agree with Abhinandan. Now you know why I included this letter. This letter hit home. Football is the best, athletic and democratic, unlike privilege-heavy sports like tennis, golf and F1. Again, golf is not a sport. It's a game. Saw comments of Anand Varnan sir's talking style. He doesn't need validation, but I support him fully. I enjoy listening to him exactly because he doesn't speak in tweet-length sentences and has tons of info to share, even give citations sometimes, which is so rare. He's someone who'd love to chat over a slow evening tea. Not a long drive, and that's fine by me. Can't wait for his new NL show. So thank you, Akshit. And the email that we received this week that we have collected with the rest, which will be read later, are Manan, Perisai Teja, Joey, 21 Fern, Orpita, Soma, Shrikant, Madan, Ibrahim. So thank you so much for your feedback. I hope this new way of dealing with the letters is acceptable to all. And when we do the Hafta letters special, you will see all will be addressed without being hurried through. So I quite like this system. On that note, sir, recommendations for the week. You want to go first?
Yeah, I have 2 recommendations. One I have already spoken about. This is the documentary that we have done, released last week. This is the story of 5 persons who were arrested in Delhi 2020. And in most of the cases, they are out on bail. They have got their bail, but they are still stuck in the jail for the past 4-5 years because the Delhi police had slapped UAPA. But I'm very sure that they are going to come out of that. But the documentary is more about the reasons. It shows the humanitarian part of their side and the family. So I think the must watch documentary. And the second is there is a movie called Close. I think this was nominated for the Oscar, and it's right now on Mubi platform. It's a very good movie, story of two children, say two very good friends, and for some reasons, one pushes. They were teased as couples in the class, and how one guy, he started distancing himself, and the other one commits suicide. So the sensitivity, among children has been handled so well in this movie. Is called Close. I think it is a French movie.
Right.
Must watch.
Okay, Manisha.
So we have two very good pieces on Newslaundry by Vivek Kaul. One on Trump's tariffs and a psychological aspect of it, along with the economics, of course. The other one is on Piyush Goyal, what he gets right and what he gets terribly wrong with the whole startup conversation that he started. So definitely read these two pieces. And the documentary on Delhi riots, it's a must watch. Please go to our YouTube channel, check it out, spend some time on it, and please share it.
Right. Shardool?
I have two recommendations. The first one is, and I wanted to recommend this earlier, but I couldn't be here like a couple of weeks ago. It's National Security Archive, which has specific aspect of it. It's called What Gorbachev Heard. So if you want to understand the European politics and why Russia is doing that, don't take sides. Just listen to what Gorbachev was told when USSR was at the brink of its, it was the end of its fag end, basically. And how slowly and steadily NATO and EU and America have been, dismantling what the established order, what things which were agreed upon. So it's a very interesting read. The other one is, I wanted to recommend this in February and I kept forgetting it in Charcha and in Hafta. It's not something to read. It's a dish. It's a Persian dish called Khoresh Baad Mein Jaan.
Acha, that's a good, interesting one.
So-
A recommendation, food item. We should include that, not just enrich your lives through feeding the mind, enrich your lives also by feeding the belly. Good one.
So what happened was
Actually, sorry to
yes.
interrupt. Sir, from next week, everyone also has to recommend a dish to eat. I think that's a great idea. You have to come up with
Don't-
something.
I can.
No, not
Can't
come
be
up with
forced.
something that could be disastrous.
No, I'm not saying you have to invent one, but I think it's a very good idea.
So what happened was I was watching The Penguin,
Hmm.
and it was last year's, in my opinion, one of the best series. So they mentioned this dish, and it looked very good to me. So I researched it. So it's a Persian dish, basically like fried or baked eggplants with beef or like mutton, whichever meat you prefer. So, and I tried to find it in any Irani place in Delhi. It was not there. So I found a blog of a Persian auntie and how to
Who
make
gave
it.
you
So
the
I made it
recipe.
at home and it was very good. Yeah.
Arey wah.
It's basically like meat stew with eggplants. Khoresh Baad Mein Jaan. You'll have the recipe, that link in the recommendations.
Right. I have two recommendations. One is this podcast by NPR, Planet Money. I think it's a very instructive one for news consumers, even for people in administration governments, on how you need a carrot and stick approach to really change something. How the war on drugs got us blueberries. It tells you how Peru, which was a hub for the drug trade, for the Colombian, stuff getting to the US, and how USAID is not just influencing mind. Using things like USAID, you got to disincentivize people, farmers, from growing cocoa to make cocaine. But you have to also incentivize them that if you don't grow cocoa, what will you do? Blueberries, jiska bahut demand tha US mein.
Yes.
And how all these US agencies got together. Now the US market is flooded by blueberries from Peru, which actually benefit both people. It's a great carrot and stick approach on how to actually do significant change, and which includes commerce. And the other, I haven't mentioned this show in the past, which I think is hysterically funny. It's a very old show called Loose Talk. It's a Pakistani show. There are two specific episodes I'm recommending in the show notes, which they have guests, spoof guests from India It is such cutting satire that I think you must watch it. And ironically enough, I don't think India can do such satire anymore. And Pakistani.
It's called
was doing it.
Kallu.
It's called Loose Talk. And on that note, we'd like to thank our wonderful sound recordist Anil, our wonderful producer Priyali, and all of you who did write in and subscribe and pay to keep news free. Thank you, panel. Thank you, Shardool, Manisha, Raman.
Thank
We
you.
shall see you next week. We leave you with this song.
Bye.
Enjoy your
Bye.
weekend.